much after 6 o'clock. A very good evening to you, watching another Eyewitness News special broadcast from the National Results Operations Centre of the IEC at Gallagher Convention Centre. I'm Thembekile Mrototo. In the next hour, we'll speak to the various political parties here who are now seeing their fortunes on the leaderboard displayed here at the Results Centre. And speaking of the leaderboard, let's show it to you now, because there have been some significant changes in the last few hours. As things stand, only 3 parties have been able to get well over 1 million votes. The ANC is sitting at about 4.4 million of votes that have been declared and published so far. That gives the party around 41% of the vote. The DA still second at about 2.4 million. They're hovering just over 22%. And then you've got the MK party, Jacob Zuma's new political outfit, sitting at 1.3 million. They are in 3rd position, and the EFF still trailing 4th at just under, well, the EFF, in fact, has just managed to get past that 1 million mark. They've been hovering around 900,000 for most of the day. Now, these results that we're looking at tonight, these aren't the final or the full set of results, but they are in line with predictions that what we are going to see for the first time is a coalition at national government. Now, looking at how things are looking at the moment, the ANC would mathematically be able to have an easier route to a coalition because they're above 40%, 42%. So if they can get 8, 9, 10%, then they would be able to form another government, but through a coalition. Well, let's speak about this now with the party spokesperson, Mahlengi Bengumutsiri, who's with me here on set. A very good evening to you, ma'am. Thank you so much for coming in. This is the ANC's worst electoral performance in 30 years. Has the party been humbled?
Well, the party has always been humbled. And why do I say this, Thembekile? When the party in 2022 adopted what we called Vision 2032, the renewal program, that was signaling the need for humility and the need for self-correction, the need for reaching out more to our support base and to our strong bases and to our people, and for a need for accelerated service delivery. So the humbling has been part of our conversation.
But not humble enough, because the electorate has lost faith in you. You're down more than 10% from your 2019 performance.
We acknowledge that, but also we do acknowledge the fact that we're still the largest party in South Africa. And therefore, we still are going to be in government. And we have a number of learnings from the experience of the past 30 years, including the experience of the past 5 years.
What makes you so sure that you will be in government? Have you already started courting coalition partners? Because for all intents and purposes, you're likely going to need one this year.
Well, we have not begun that conversation, and certainly not officially, because we are keeping a watching brief on the leaderboard. You know, we can't afford to be too hasty. We want to see.
Are you still hopeful that by some miracle, I heard your DSG Nomvula Mkonyani saying, you know, the metros are also going to come in later, so you want to see where things will stand when we're about 90% of votes in?
I think it's only a responsible thing to do. You know, you wait for the pronouncement of election results. We certainly will be open to conversations that are aimed at building a better life for all in South Africa, that aim at not deferring the dream of freedom, that are not going to subvert the transformation journey, that are aimed at uniting the people of South Africa and having a strong sense of a national dialogue and building a strong social compact. And so the unity among political parties is a component of that effort. As to which party that will be, that's a product of an internal conversation, you know, and you know, pronouncements.
But the reality is the pollsters had already predicted that the ANC would be sitting at around 42 to 45% after this year's election. When you saw those polls, how seriously did the ANC take them, and what sort of planning did you start to do for this moment, which now appears to have arrived?
Well, I mean, we've not really, let me be candid and say that, remember, there have been so many polls. Surely you can't run a campaign on the basis of pollsters, including pollsters that are funded by opposition parties.
So they were right.
Well, not entirely, not all of them. But I'm just saying that as a matter of principle, any self-respecting incumbent governing party cannot entirely rely on polls. You can observe them, You can follow them, but you don't make decisions on the basis of the polls. Our own internal research is what we've relied on, and the internal research gave us what we are seeing.
And how much of the internal research and externally what was being said from the polls, let's say, that you took seriously as the ANC, that you felt were credible, informed how you approached the campaign? Because in the final stretch, we saw, for example, quite a busy schedule for people like former President Thabo Mbeki. Another former leader of yours, Kgalema Motlanthe, was also out and about.
Well, I would imagine that with or without the pollsters, independent ones, including our own, the campaigning by the elders of the ANC was never really a master stroke. In a way, it was being punted
Clearly not, as per the results.
by media colleagues. It was something that was meant to happen because, and I kept emphasizing this point, they are members and they're elders of the ANC. They actually have an obligation to carry out responsibilities given to them. And of course, it's good that they made themselves available. But the way it was being punted, it was almost like, it's a Dalai Lama situation coming to South Africa. No, they are senior and elders of the ANC that ought to do so. And I think they contributed immensely to our elections campaign. We ran a very strong, positive, and a clean elections campaign.
But the taste of failure, not defeat, must be quite bitter for the ANC because you've never been in this position at national level. It was almost always guaranteed and to an extent taken for granted. I mean, in the last election, you were just about 55%.
Well, I suppose the ANC is going to have to go back and reflect very strongly, and we are capable of doing so. And we are also capable of even playing any other role in society for as long as we can guarantee that the set of policies that we put out to South Africa can continue to be implemented and work for the betterment of the people of this country.
Does that mean you're willing to be the official opposition if you can't put together a coalition? And by that, then, what are your non-negotiables as the ANC?
Well, I mean, as I said, the set of policies that the ANC has introduced in this country are very important. For example, if anyone wants to do away with black economic empowerment, which has actually enabled a lot of young women to occupy and take up spaces in corporate and elsewhere, in academia and so on, employment equity, the minimum wage, we're going to be looking at whoever whose values align with the idea of transformation.
So let's play a game then, Makeng, of who would you rather? DA, MK, or EFF?
I'm not at the game. The game can be played from tomorrow afternoon onwards.
So you're open to a tango with either one?
No, at this point, I really don't have even the mandate to play that game. You know, the ANC operates on the basis of internal democracy. We don't do pay as you go. We literally get mandated in terms of public pronouncements. But I'll be more than happy to play that game once I have that particular mandate. But the issue of our values, our historical mission as the ANC, the reason we were founded by our forebears, is going to be the biggest consideration in terms of whoever we get into a conversation with.
You referenced tomorrow night, Saturday evening. Is that when the ANC has decided that it will begin in earnest conversations about who to partner with for coalition?
No, the ANC will issue a formal statement at that time. The conversation about partnering is a conversation that belongs to the officials of the ANC, the top 7 that is led by President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Will there be consequences, by the way, for the top 7? Because there's some suggestion that there should be consequences for a leadership that ultimately has led the ANC to its worst electoral performance. And if there are consequences, I wonder what those might be.
Well, I'm not aware that we don't have anything like that in the ANC's constitution.
So collective responsibility.
Well, that's part of the lexicon of the ANC. But I mean, I cannot even hazard a guess about how the NEC is going to study the electoral outcome and what conclusions it would get to. But we don't have a thing that says that, you failed us, you, Thembekile, failed us, you, Mahlengi, failed us. We have a thing of we went into this thing together.
It's quite a thing, though, Mahlengi, for the ANC, because part of the reason why the ANC has come undone in a historic way in this election is that one of your former leaders led the charge, and he remains a leader of the ANC.
Well, he's suspended from the ANC if we're talking about Mr. Jacob Zuma.
But he's still a member.
Well, he's still a member, a suspended member, whilst the processes are underway to discipline him in the correct manner, such that you don't set a new precedent, because it's important to be loyal and dutiful to the dictates of the ANC constitution. May not make sense to other people, but in the culture of the ANC, you don't just expel someone summarily, except in instances or circumstances where a summary expulsion is warranted.
His daughter, Duduzile Zuma, was saying here on the floor yesterday that they don't find it weird at all that Jacob Zuma holds ANC and MK membership. Does the ANC share the same view? And it must be mighty awkward, right? Because if you do, let's say, look to a coalition with the MK, do you pause the suspension and disciplinary process of Jacob Zuma as its leader to ensure that that does not interfere with the chances of a coalition? Is there even room to maneuver? Because this is, for all intents and purposes, uncharted territory that you may have to negotiate with a suspended member who could help you hold on to governance.
Well, that's very interesting. I mean, you've been clearly thinking very deeply about these matters, Thembekile. But I do want to say that it is absolutely awkward that you can have someone holding two political memberships. And that is why he's being subjected to a disciplinary process. So I don't know what it is that Ms. Duduzile Zuma was saying. I'm not sure that also that she's familiar with the processes of the ANC. I wouldn't want to comment on that. Secondly, the process of disciplining Mr. Zuma continues regardless of the electoral outcome. Continues.
So even if you were to go into a coalition with the MK, you would still haul him before a DC?
That's a process that is underway. There is no one who can simply just willy-nilly stop that process. It's under under the aegis of the National Disciplinary Committee, using the National Disciplinary Policy of the ANC.
Makhengi Bengumtsiri, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll be
Thembekile.
talking more throughout this weekend. By the
Thank
way,
you.
still here at the National Results Operations Centre, we've heard from the ANC. Someone else who was here, whose party has had an underwhelming performance in this year's general election, is Herman Mashaba. ActionSA, while popular with voters in Gauteng, for example, Johannesburg, Pretoria and Ekurhuleni, if you look at the numbers this year, it's been less than impressive. They've not even made it to the top 5. Let's have a look.
The only party that's really happy in this arrangement this time is MK, and to some extent the Patriotic Alliance. Everyone is actually bleeding. So for us as a party, we've got to really take ourselves really seriously, because our representation in the National Assembly in the province is the first time. So it's a milestone. It's a major achievement for us. I mean, at the time we pushed the Senate to say, guys, we want 5 to 7% representation, and obviously the impact of MK has negatively impacted us. But we're going to have, as Michael has also indicated, we'll have 5, 6 or so members of Parliament to ensure that we can take our message across, and hopefully also how the other parties have in the past taken our taxes to fund the political parties. ActionSA will really benefit from that, and will use that money correctly. I'm sure you guys know very well my family's role in setting up this movement for South Africans, and it's something that I'd really like to really thank people of South Africa.
Doing that very nicely.
Yeah, after a very underwhelming day for ActionSA as far as election performance is concerned. Now, the EFF in the last decade has held a steady position at number 3 in terms of the national tally of results in this country. So far, from what we've seen, they've been outdone by Jacob Zuma's MK party. The EFF, for the first time since it started contesting elections, now sits 4th. The party's Thembekile Mrototo was leading a delegation here at the National Results Operations Centre earlier, and she reflected on how they're doing so far, as well as issues they have with the IEC after the dashboard crashed earlier this morning, leading to concerns about what exactly led to the problem. Have a listen.
doing that very nice. The ANC is stagnant at 42%. We want to drop it even more, and it's going to drop because bigger leaders are not coming.
What's the point of them dropping if you're still going to give them the votes and co-govern with them?
But we never said we're giving them a vote. But
You didn't rule it out.
This is, but the people of South Africa have not decided who must be the majority, and we need to make government. So we need to speak at the end of the day. If there will not be an outright majority, we can't say no, we're not speaking, even when the South Africans have not fully decided in their majority who must rule.
What would
At
be
the end
the
of the
condi-
day, at the end of the day, we need to form government.
Yeah, what would be the condition for the EFF? Is it Deputy President Julius Malema or Floyd Shivambu as the Finance Minister before you even have conversations with the ANC?
No, our condition remains that exam that Mbarilo was talking about of the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars. We are not here to exchange positions. We are here to change the status quo. We are here to change the living conditions of our people. And what will change the living conditions of our people is the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars of the EFF. The land. We need back the land. We need to expropriate land without compensation. We need to create state capacity. We need to stop load shedding because you're going to get the land. And then you're going to want to industrialize this country, which would ordinarily create a lot of employment. But if you don't have electricity, you'll not be able to do that. So 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars of the EFF remains what will be on the table. Even before talking about positions, we're not really married to positions. For as long as whoever we draw the card with will agree to our 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars.
Let's take you back to the board here at the National Results Operations Centre at Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand in Johannesburg. Have a look at those numbers. The ANC is still climbing in the vote and far more underwhelming performance than they used to, but they've got about 4.4 million of the votes that have been declared or published so far by the IEC. The DA is the second party that's managed to get over 1 million votes. And if you look at that, making history in their first election, you've got, this is the provincial vote, by the way, for the Northwest. What I'm referencing is national. The MK party has managed to get 1 million votes, as has the EFF. Now, when you look at the picture in the Northwest, that's how it's looking at the moment, the state of play. The ANC in the lead with 363,000 votes. The DA there at only 80,000 votes. The EFF appears set to be the official opposition in the Northwest once more with 103,000 of the ballots which have so far been declared from voting districts. That's in the Northwest province. Nationally, there was a great deal of excitement at the beginning of this year, in fact in the last year or so, at the emergence of newer political parties. Musi Maimani's Build One South Africa, for example, as well as Rise Mzansi, led by Songezo Zibi. Now, their performance has also been making headlines because it's been far from what people expected. Both parties at the moment are hovering around the region of 40,000 votes. Let's talk about this now with Songezo Zibi, leader of Rise Mzansi. Songezo, very good evening to you. So you took a shot at being a politician.
Yes.
At this stage, when you read those results, it doesn't look like you've made a success of it.
No, listen, we're 13 months down the line, and we always had a long-term objective as Rise Mzansi. Were two big objectives for this election. The first one was to establish ourselves as a national organization that is nationally recognized. It's got a national footprint. We're able to put ourselves on the ballot in all 9 provinces. And we become part of the political conversations through the issues that we drive that are important to voters. And I think we've established that part. The second was to be able to put people in parliament and to put people in a few legislatures so that voters can see how you perform when you've been elected. The second will be borne out by the election results. But we were always very realistic in terms of what a new political organization, not a breakaway, no existing structures, setting everything up from scratch can achieve in a year.
But you would have thought the idea of a party, let's say, that is positioning itself as a fresh wind, right?
Yeah.
A party with no political history would be appealing. But it clearly has not been, because it's the parties where there are people with a political history which have done well, i.e. Jacob Zuma's MK. Why would your proposal not work in a country where people were saying they want change?
So, Jacob, the MK is not new. It's an externalized faction of the ANC. Mm-hmm. It left en masse with existing structures of the ANC and so on, in the same way that COPE did in the previous election. There is actually no history in South Africa of a brand new political party that is not a breakaway, that has done well in the very next election.
So you knew you weren't going to make it?
Of course. I mean, come on. We're realistic and we use a lot of data. Let me give you an example. Well, when you have contested an election before, you know which wards and voting districts to focus on because you know where your voters are. When you're new, you just don't know. So you kind of feeling your way around and seeing where you're picking up good organizers and volunteers and going on that basis. Now that we have the data, for instance, there are some areas where we know that in the next month or two we'll contest a by-election. Couldn't take that decision before because there's no information. So now we're always very sort of pragmatic in terms of what is possible.
But there are also people who feel that a party like Rise is, let me say, niche, for want of a better word, very middle class, very urban. It resonates perhaps with, let's say, the average Joe who may live in Morningside and Sandton, works a nice job at a bank or a law firm, and has a specific set of, let's say, of expectations of a government, but you don't necessarily translate to what the majority of South Africans would want spoken to.
No, that's absolutely not true. In fact, I mean, it's just that not all the information isn't. But I'll give you some examples in terms of the positive for us as well as the negative, so that people can, listeners and viewers can understand what we're talking about. So the areas where we now believe that we've got offshoots, a sort of green shoots of support that we can build on, range from areas like Mthatha, like Butterworth, parts of Buffalo City, Mdantsane, Fort Grey, and so on. So there are wards where we know that we've got support, as well as areas here in Gauteng and in Madibeng. So we're going to contest a by-election in Madibeng now in June. That's not here, in the suburbs. We're going to contest a by-election ward in the suburbs of Johannesburg. So these areas are diverse. It's just that Johannesburg and where the media and social media conversation is a bubble.
And
That's
the criticism, right?
That's the
you
thing.
speak to that bubble, and that bubble is
we-
not going to lead to any revolutions.
But we
for want of a better
don't,
word.
Thembekile, by virtue of what I've just told you. I can't possibly tell you that we've come second in some parts of KSD, and you tell me you're in the Joburg bubble. Mthatha is dead poor.
I get that, but the problem is, and you're targeting areas where you say you'll be able, for example, to contest by-elections. When you've got a party as big as the ANC, which has seen its worst electoral performance to date, you've got the EFF basically knocked out of third position nationally by the MK. Those established parties.
We've
who
also
may
been knocked
have-
out, by the way, in areas like Orange Farm by MK.
So, if those sort of big parties, right, who have had success in the past, are also now going to be aggressively trying to claw back support, they've got more resources, more reach. How do you compete successfully?
We always knew we would need to do that. Though there's some stats that are worth noting out of this. So, first of all, and I've said this a million times, that voter turnout in 2021 was really poor. It's worse now. And I think it's partly got to do with the IEC, but it's worse. Secondly, you've got a net decline in the top three political parties outside MK. ANC, net decline. EFF, net decline. The DA in absolute numbers, you must check. Right. What is that? That's a rejection.
Vela says she's done very well.
That's
They've gone up,
I'm going to give you a number.
despite the emergence of the mercenaries.
I'm going to give you a number. Circa 110 to 130,000 votes are going to lose in net terms. You must check it.
John Steenhuisen
Right.
says they believe that the IEC's bungles during this electoral process may have shaved off up to a percentage of their performance.
Look, I must tell you, so I told you about KSD. I know I'm digressing from your original question. I must tell you about KSD, for instance. It was nearly impossible for people to vote in KSD.
That's in the Eastern Cape, right?
That's in the
King Sabata
it's
Dalindyebo.
King Sabata Dalindyebo, because people like Mama had to go and vote 40 kilometers away because the voters' roll is scrambled. Bantu Olomisa himself had to go and vote somewhere else in Tata General Hospital. There were people who were sent across town to go and vote there, and they didn't have transport, so they didn't go. The point is, there were glitches in the Eastern Cape. I don't want to have conspiracy theories because I think it was just operational incompetence
Do you
rather
think
than
it cost
any.
you thousands of votes?
No, I mean, look, for us, because we never expected to win a VD, this is what it means. Where we could have get 120 votes that really matter, we didn't get them. You know what I mean? So we never expected to win a VD because we are new. But there are areas where we knew we could be second to the ANC, right? We could beat the EFF, we could beat the ANC in certain places, or we could match them and so on. That kind of affects you because for us as a new organization, the small numbers matter. But the original point I was making is there is a rejection of the establishment, Thembekile. And I think we must understand that. That is why we've always said We are in it for the long haul because to convince voters, first, to trust political parties and politicians, firstly, and secondly, to trust your political party in particular is quite an effort. You
But
can't
it's
do
quite
it in one
telling.
election.
It's quite telling, though, that everyone says people are fed up with the establishment. But when you look at the parties with a collective majority chunk of the vote, they're all iterations of the ANC.
Of course.
Be it the EFF born of the ANC, be it the MK born of the ANC.
Even the
through
IFP
Zuma.
is.
So when you look at that, it seems as though parties that don't have some sort of link, past history from within the ANC are just not doing it for the electorate.
Not in terms of swing. So that's true in terms of swinging voter bases. But there's a couple of things that are really important. First of all, you need to take account of the people that don't vote at all. So there are people who've already chosen not to vote for those political parties at all. And they are in the majority of voters. So that is the first thing. The second thing is over half of the voters roll this year was born in 1990 or after. So there definitely is a swing. What they have not done, and this was our thesis from the beginning, they have not taken a decision to trust something else. They know they don't want these political parties. What is there to play for is the trust of those voters and new voters. That takes time. I must tell you, I've been in meetings, in communities, in people's garages and so on. People go, what you are saying is really interesting. I think I like it, but I'll wait.
They also don't know you.
No, of course.
And
I mean,
that's
this
the
is
reality,
thing.
right?
Yeah,
People
absolutely.
like what they know.
Absolutely.
So
This
how
is-
do you get there?
That is, again, why we've said long haul. You can't have an unreasonable expectation in 13 months. We are not naive. We like to be data-led. The reason we posted in November last year, when nobody else was posting because they didn't think we would, is because we knew, let alone knowing me, they didn't know what my face looks like.
Yeah,
Right?
because only those of us who've been in media and people in corporate would have known you from Business Day and APSA days.
Yeah, I mean, we've tested, for instance. John Steenhuisen himself, the reason they've got a poster of John and Soli and another premier is to push up his name recognition, and he's been in politics for how long? As a chief whip of the DA. So we've got a very experienced campaign management team. They know these things. We knew we have to get my name recognition up and rise Mzansi's name recognition up. You cannot do it in a year, in one election, when John and the DA, who've been around longer than us, are struggling to breach 50%.
Let me ask you about money.
Yes.
In the last 2 weeks, you know the story.
I do.
Everyone is talking about this 15 million rand from
And the first one.
We the People, an entity that was apparently, allegedly, born of the Rivonia Circle, where you were involved as leader, and ultimately then, when you look at the records, it apparently comes up to about Feb, but then there was money, allegedly, funneled through that, it appears, into Rise Mzansi. So the suggestion is that that entity was created with the sole intention of, in some way, bypassing the need to declare.
No, absolutely not. I mean, there are two points of declaration in the Electoral Funding Act. The political party has to declare and provide supporting documentation. The donor has to declare and provide supporting documentation to the IEC. As I sit here now, I am satisfied that in respect of both ourselves and we are the people, the requirements of the Electoral Funding Act have been met.
Question is, Madgaban, whose money is this?
And here's a point. If I were to ask you the same question about some of the DA's donors in that 65 million, you don't know 70% of them.
But now people have flagged this for you, so we could do
Because
a whataboutism thing forever. But the reality is, with you, because you're new, people would expect that you would be, as a breath of fresh air, once again, different, even in the extent to which you're transparent. So who is we the people?
We are the people who have done several TV interviews themselves. I cannot and will not speak on their behalf. They need to answer those questions, because if I try and answer those questions, A, I don't have the information, and secondly, it validates a conflation that people are making. The reality, though, is this. What we expected was squeeze campaigning, which is in the last 4 to 5 weeks of an election, parties are going to attack each other to get voters to have a negative view. But if you were to look at that electoral declaration list, 70% of the donors that people don't know. They've got no idea who they are.
But does that mean that we should accept that, to a degree, ultimately all parties get questionable funding, or funding where perhaps the root of the money or the origins don't make sense or follow accepted logic?
People accept worse. this is how political parties fund themselves. And what we get punished for is actually declaring, right? There is a universe where, like the ANC and other political parties, we simply don't declare, we get money in cash.
Is this clean money? I think
No,
that's-
absolutely.
I think that's the main
No,
concern.
absolutely. That's the one thing we'd want to know. Let me put it to you this way. If for whatever reason we are the people were to declare where they got their money from, I would have no concerns whatsoever.
Okay. Strong as a leader of Rise Mzansi. Hopefully we'll see you during the next election. Thank you so much
We'll be around.
for
Trust
speaking
me.
to Eyewitness News. Right now, though, want to take a look once more at those results. Day 3 that we have been here looking at the results. Wednesday was voting. From yesterday, things began to take shape. This is the national picture tonight.
can
The
leave now.
ANC,
Okay, cool.
4.5 million of the votes in the bag. The DA, 2.4 million. MK Party still in third position at 1.4 million. The EFF in the last half an hour or so managed to get up above 1 million. There they are. Only 4 parties sitting at over 1 million. ActionSA, by the way, have climbed quite a bit from yesterday. They're now sitting at around 120,000. When we spoke yesterday, they were barely past the 35,000 mark. Shiluba, Bongani Baloyi, former DA mayor in Midvaal, they're not doing well at all. 1,633 votes is what they've got. The UDM, led by Bantu Holomisa, they don't have a resounding success either because they've got, let's look at the UDM, about 59,000 votes so far. The Freedom Front Plus, Frey Hates Front, they've got 158,000 of the votes. Let's cast our eyes to KwaZulu-Natal because a lot of interesting things are happening in KZN. You've got the MK Party, new political players. They look like they're headed towards the 1 million mark in KZN. They're sitting at around 891,000, if I'm seeing that correctly, in KwaZulu-Natal. I just want to see the ANC. It's sitting at about 370,000 in KZN. And then if you look at the DA, 252,000. The EFF suffering massive losses in KwaZulu-Natal as far as results that we have so far. Very important to highlight that these are not the final results, but the EFF sitting at 45 or 46,000, 46,000 I think that is. And then the list goes on and on. But for all intents and purposes, the MK Party appears to have done a clean sweep of things when you look at KwaZulu-Natal. Let's bring in the party spokesperson, Mr. Ntlamulo Ndlela. Ntlamulo, good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
All smiles, I see, from your camp.
Well, should we say smirks for now?
Better than expected performance?
Indeed, much better than expected. But again, you know, the VDs that have come in terms of the numbers that we're seeing, is based on the smaller VDs. That's why you saw DA, you know, shoot through because most of them are the smaller VDs. The bigger VDs are now coming in the form of specifically, let's say, KZN itself. You know, the Zululand, all the other further outskirts regions, those are now coming in. And, you know, that's going to have an impact. There's no doubt on that number that you see in KZN.
How much higher do you think you're going to go in KZN?
Look,
You're
there's
at
no
about
reason.
800,000, I think, now?
Yes, correct. But there's no reason why we should not be hitting above 55% in KZN. There's no doubt about that. Because we know, you know...
My math is
the
terrible.
impact
What is this in percentage terms? Are you past 50?
We were at 48, somewhere around there.
So you
in the
might have
late
to go to a
40s.
coalition.
We'll see.
If you don't hit 51,
No, we'll see.
you're going to a coalition.
We'll see.
Are you
We'll see.
ready for the possibility?
Well, naturally, if you find yourself in a situation where you have to have those kind of discussions, you ought to have them. But, you know, when we engage, and this is our position, first and foremost, with any party that we engage in coalition discussion or negotiations with, one of the first questions we're going to ask is, do you want to change the constitution? Do you agree? Are you aligned to that first?
To what extent becomes the question, right?
Yes, to what extent, but naturally, you know. But here's the reality.
What is your non-compromise? When you talk about constitutional change, what do you want to change specifically as a non-negotiable?
Exactly, but here's the reality. We have issues related to the Irrigation Act, where a person has been given rights to the whole Jozini Dam. No one can touch that water. You know, it's not even his ancestral land. And this was issued during apartheid, right? We want to institute in this new dispensation water reforms, only to find that this person takes us to court. Guess what protects him? The evergreen contract being in the Constitution. So this Constitution has been prepared and set for specific people and protects them. So you can't institute the kind of service delivery that you want organically for our people without changing this constitution. Because a lot of what we want to do does hinge on the constitution.
So you'd
If
have
we
to
wanna
play a
ensure that-
smarter game at national level.
Absolutely, there's no doubt about
So
that.
are you
We
willing
will.
to go into coalition with the ANC?
ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa?
What do you mean? Are you saying
We'll
you want an
engage-
ANC that
we'll
gets
engage-
rid of Cyril Ramaphosa?
We'll engage in discussion with the ANC, but I don't see us sitting across the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa.
Well, that's who the party has elected.
Oh, well, then it's not. Then in that case, the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa doesn't want to negotiate with us.
Also, the ANC doesn't necessarily need you. They've got the option of the EFF. They've got the action of the DA.
Well-
so it's not guaranteed that you'll be
Well, then it would be
the
interesting to see.
kingmaker.
Well, it would be interesting to see if they'll actually even get into bed with the DA. Very
But you
interesting.
realize that.
But let them go ahead.
But you
and,
realize that they've got other options where they can make it happen without giving up their leader.
Well, the reality of the situation that we're also there. They can't just make decisions. In actual fact, who says that the EFF doesn't want to speak to us already, or is not speaking to us?
But
Who
the
says
point
that the
is-
IFP is not speaking
the
to us?
point is, though, they've got a shorter route to a coalition than you would.
Well, let them with the DA.
They could.
Well, let them go with the DA.
And so my point is,
That- well, the
this, is
interesting part-
this is negotiation. So the point I'm trying to make here in Nhlamulo is, unfortunately, there are things that you're just not going to get, especially from a party that's already got about 42%. And I think it's fair to assume that sacking their leader, who was elected by conference, would be a bridge too far.
Well, it's fair to say that they're in this position because of the same leader. Fact.
Would
so,
you sack,
so if they
would
want
you sack Jacob Zuma for the sake of a coalition?
How can we sack a president that built a party in 5 months and put us on the
How
map
can
just
they-
like that? How does that make sense?
How can they sack a president they elected?
No, how can they should sack a person that has actually made them lose all the vote and move from a 50% to a 40%. That's just the reality, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
It's underperformance. If you underperform in your role, aren't you supposed to be sacked?
Well, they
it
take-
means he's a liability, and
I
that's
was
just
speaking
the
to
reality.
Mahlengi earlier, the
Yes.
spokesperson for the ANC, and she said they don't do that, where there's individual responsibility apportioned, collective responsibility. From the days, by the way, when your founding father, Jacob Zuma, was leader of the ANC, that's always been their principle, that they take collective responsibility. So
Well,
what would you put on the table that would force them to deviate from that?
President Zuma left an ESCOM that never owed 160 billion rand. President Zuma left a country that had lights. President Zuma left
Well,
a
there was
country
already
that all
load
those kind of
shedding,
issues.
not as intense, but
No,
there was
no
load
load
shedding.
shedding.
There
President
was
Zuma
load
ended it.
shedding.
President Zuma ended
No,
load
he did
shedding.
not.
Yes,
there
he
was
did.
still load shedding, Nhlamulo.
We had,
Let's not be
we had a
dishonest.
good 3 years with no load shedding. And that's
But
a fact.
When he
he
left in
said
2017, there had already been
Well, there-
load shedding.
well,
Not
there-
as intense as
well-
2022, 2023, and
the
early
reality-
2024, but there was there.
the
It
reality-
was there.
But we didn't have to unbundle ESCOM.
But there was load shedding.
We didn't have to unbundle
But there
ESCOM.
was load
There was
shedding.
lights.
You're shifting
There
now.
was lights. No, I'm
You're
not shifting. I'm telling
First
you the
said
fact.
there was no load shedding.
I'm saying, no.
You said there was no load
Here's
shedding.
the reality. You know, if we're going to engage here, let's engage constructively,
Okay.
right? Because I think we're not exactly advancing
Yeah.
the position of the listener here. When I refer to the debt, I'm talking is because off the back of how is it that at 85 billion rand and ESCOM in terms of their losses, what they're sitting with, to 160 billion. Why does that jump during Cyril Ramaphosa's period, right? At 85 billion, we had lights for a good 3 years. You go and do your research, you'll see when President Zuma said, I'm stopping load shedding, he stopped load shedding. And there was lights. He left office, there's load shedding. You know why? Because this load shedding is benefiting Cyril Ramaphosa's friends in the form of diesel. That's why the jump in terms of the debt that you see. Where we now moved from 85 billion when President Zuma left it to 160. Now we're being told we need IPPs to get electricity. That can't be. We don't need IPPs. And if you look at the tariff related to that, it's much more expensive to the South African citizen. And that's the reality. So we can't come and create an impression as if, President Zuma left a country that was not functional. No. The country has deteriorated. There's not even trains moving. That's the reality.
Trains weren't moving in some areas 10 years ago already.
That is not true. The reality
said in
is
some areas trains weren't moving 10 years ago.
No, if you look at the contract that was signed with
Are you
Transnet and the Chinese, listen to me, this is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Today, when this Cyril Ramaphosa government had to, maintain them, Pravin Gordhan didn't want to maintain them because, you know what, they were bought under Cyril Ramaphosa's era. So why did it, and he actually had to wait till the last minute to fly to China, which was embarrassing, the fact that, these individuals want to politicize service delivery.
So trains only stopped moving in South Africa post-2017.
Yes, that's true. By the way, we had a vibrant logistics arm, which in the form of Transnet at the time. It functioned, it worked. There were programs. Transnet Invest looked at huge infrastructure and port infrastructure in Africa, investments. What has happened in the past years since he's become president? Nothing. Give me one infrastructure project that we can say is organic and has had an impact in this country.
I want
Nothing.
to ask you about this, Ne. The reality is the MK is now a big player, right? In
Yes.
South African
Oh, now
politics.
we are?
Oh no, I never denied
Oh, thank
that.
you.
I didn't.
I thought
Did
you.
I start with the denial?
No, well, it seemed as if you were actually underplaying our role. I'm glad you're actually realizing that.
I did not. Welcome to the big time. Unfortunately, this is how it goes.
Well, hey, 5 months later.
This is how it goes, right? It's not always going to be comfortable. I want to
Oh,
ask.
well, it hasn't been with all the
hold
court
on.
cases.
Here's what I want to ask you. When you look at the political landscape, let's say you don't become
Yeah.
part of a coalition. Earlier in our conversation, for example, one of the things you said is we were not having a conversation that was perhaps best suited for imparting, let's say, information to the viewer, right?
Yes.
How do you become an effective player in the opposition benches if you don't end up as part of a coalition? Because a lot of people in the last 24 hours, when it became clear that MK was doing well, were saying they're not even all that clear on your value proposition, what it is that you stand for, etc.
Well, look, let's put it this way to you. If people don't want to align with us, we're fine to sit where we are. We'll focus on KZN. We'll use KZN as a template to demonstrate to the country that we are more than capable of running a government. It's fine. Let them continue the way that they want. South Africans will respond again. Come 2026, South Africans are going to respond. And let me tell you, all we have to do is just focus on what we need to do, turn that province around, bring about service delivery, end the sewage that ends up in the ocean, make it functional and vibrant again.
Right.
It's well positioned in terms of the investment.
So getting
especially
the
economic
basics
zone.
right.
So let's get the basics right. If people don't want to engage with us, that's fine. Let them be. But we know what happens with coalitions in this country. We know that we're not mature enough for coalitions, especially with those that have been in this space for the longest time.
What would be-
It's a clear indication that, in actual fact, it will infringe on the people's rights in terms of service delivery. That's
So
the
earlier,
reality.
we were talking about the fact that, for example, MK is not keen on an ANC-led coalition partner, right? In terms of, let's say, if a coalition did come about, are there positions in cabinet that the MK party would say these are absolute trade-offs that you would want? Let's say a ministry that you think an MK person should hold in order for the coalition to work.
Let's start with the following. I said we will engage to form a united front with progressive parties that are like-minded, that want to see change. There's no doubt about that, right? And we're saying the ANC Ramaphosa it's not the ANC we know. It's bought. If they can't even implement the policies that they have to date, right, and they sit in a book, hence I asked you, what infrastructure, what project have they done? What have they done for people?
So-
we can't engage with them.
When we speak of
we
the
can't
ANC
engage with
Ramaphosa,
that kind of an ANC.
it
we
requires-
are willing to engage with the ANC in discussions. There's no doubt about that. But okay, continue.
I was going to say, you talk about the ANC of Ramaphosa. Am I right to say in that it's fair to read in that he's not the only problem with the ANC at the moment, so that it would have to change in a far more significant
They
way?
know what we mean by the ANC Ramaphosa.
What do you mean?
He's a liability to them.
So
and they
if-
know it. In actual fact, we have helped them make their decision easier. They've
If
always
he
wanted him out.
goes, all will be well with the ANC.
We'll engage with the ANC, not the ANC of Ramaphosa.
If he goes, all will be well with the ANC.
We'll engage with the ANC, not the ANC of Ramaphosa.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you about something else. Your relationship with the EFF. Do you see them as an ally?
Well, look at this, put it this way. The EFF has got, in many areas, policies that are aligned to us. In many areas, we share the same ideology on the issue of land, on the issue of jobs, on the issue of education. Naturally so. On the issue of nationalizing certain assets of the state. Naturally so. So, are they a progressive party? Yes, they're a progressive party. There's no doubt about that. Are they focused on liberating our people? Yes, they want to see that, and organically so. And we stand for the same. So, what's wrong with that?
Okay. So they are an
And the
ally.
same with the IFP.
So you see them as friends.
Well, we see them as people we can work with, yes.
And just lastly, on the issue, I'm going back to coalitions because, that's the big thing that we're expecting post
Yes.
this process. Who's going to make the decisions on how the MK party forges ahead in those discussions
Well, the leadership of MK will make that
as a
decision.
collective?
Yes, all decisions are made as a collective, with our president there with his wisdom. We engage as a leadership core, which is similar to what they refer as the NEC. And by the way, in there, we have doctors, we have engineers, we have very smart people, we have also representatives from civil society, in the form of also soldiers and so on and so forth as well. So we engage and we have discussions with the president, with the president present, and it's not a dictatorship with the president. We engage in discussion. And any decision that we take as a collective. That's it, nothing more, nothing less.
And going forward, how do you? You made great inroads in KZN. inroads in Mpumalanga as well. You're doing quite well there. How do you then, in the post-election period, grow in some of the other areas?
Well, like I said, we need to demonstrate that we can perform. We need to demonstrate our capability. We said this is going to be a litmus test in terms of how people are viewed. This is a litmus test for them to say, can MK actually do this, right? If you look at our people's mandate, we're very clear in there with the 8 pillars, and the theme is reclaiming. We need to demonstrate that we can implement what we said we'll implement first and foremost, and have some level of referenceability, which we can then say, this is what we're able to do. You see, that's the nice thing about it. Once you perform here, everything else becomes a domino effect. Naturally so. Because people will start to say, but actually, why did I even vote for this ANC? Why did I even vote for this party? Why did I vote for that party? Because I would have seen that, in actual fact, maybe we should move to KZN, it's nicer there.
How much of what the MK stands for, and you credit fairly a great deal to Jacob Zuma's presence as leader of the party, much of that has contributed to your success this week, right? How much of the MK's identity hinges on Jacob Zuma's personality, his history as a politician, and would there be an MK party without him?
Well, how can there be an MK party without him when he's the founder? He's the founder, first and foremost. So let's look at it from the genesis of this. He's the founder. Remember what happened is that in 1960, when ANC was disbanded, 1961, MK military was formed to take the country back by way of the bullet. This time around, we're saying that this ANC is the same. It's in the same position. It's synonymous with what happened then. They're straitjacketed by virtue of the fact that they bought with this leader of this, and they're unable to implement the policies that ought to liberate our people. We're saying that now, because this ANC cannot function in the way that it ought to be, we will set Mkhonto Wesizwe party to win the country by way of the ballot. And this is why we've formed this. So we've also said that this is a spiritual process. President Zuma is one person who's selfless. Yes, he formed Mkhonto Wesizwe for people. Look at the response. It's clear that people want it and we're looking for a solution and an alternative. They've got it now.
Do you think the best thing for our democracy is the sort of democracy where ultimately we're going to an era where none of you as political parties are guaranteed a majority? By that I mean where all of you know that you're always one election away from defeat.
Look, I think what's important for South Africans is as long as political parties deliver and don't politicize, and there's also political will to ensure change and effect change for South Africans and civil society, the better. If it means that people must not be comfortable in order for that to happen, then so shall it be.
Because the criticism is that the ANC had too much freedom, leeway, and that they didn't have a fierce enough opposition, right? So for 30 years, there were people challenging them, but the outcome and the support was a foregone conclusion. So if all of you are sort of always aware that I've got 51, 52, 53%, and in the next election that could go away, do you think that would help better delivery?
It's important. It's important that happens for South Africans. I mean, people, and here's the biggest issue. When political parties get into government, they forget that, by the way, they are there off the back of people's votes and off the back of people's will. So if they're uncomfortable and people are not happy with them, the better. And in actual fact, we should give more power to the people. Maybe even use a parliamentary kind of model, because this, like I said, this constitution is that fly. So where people can just issue a referendum and say, you know what, we don't want you anymore, please go.
We're out of time. Jacob Zuma loves a good time. When he was ANC president, he always enjoyed those rallies after the declaration of the final results. They would gather, there'd be music, there'd be dancing. Will the MK have something similar this year? I mean, you are by far the biggest winners from this election.
Our President Zuma did state that, once we perform well, zophela zonke imbuzi, meaning every single goat in the country will be slaughtered because the people will be happy. But again,
is there a date? Are you going? Is there a date in mind?
Look, not yet.
Will I crack an invite?
Our mind is here. Of course, you'll crack an invite, but our mind is right here on the screen. Our mind is on those results and ensuring that we get a very good outcome, and we continue to be vigilant. Obviously, we're not happy with certain glitches. What happened to the 2 hours? Now technicians. And let me share something. Last night, and this is something that maybe is going to be controversial, but yeah, good for you. When I left here, there was someone in the form of the technical team that came to me and said, they were aware at one point that when the system was switched off, certain things happened.
What are certain things?
Certain things happened when the screen was switched
What
off.
are certain things?
Exactly, certain things.
No,
But
come on.
what's interesting?
Samuel,
What's interesting
You
is
see,
what's
and your
interesting.
people are going to say I'm big and fair on you, but
No.
you can't say certain things happen and not tell us what certain things are.
Certain things happened when
i.e.
the screens went off.
What are those things?
I don't know, relating to the numbers.
What
But
are you
in any
gonna do?
case,
Are you suggesting the numbers were
so
cooked?
I'm saying to you that this is what I was told.
Are you suggesting the numbers were
Listen
cooked?
to the story first so you can learn something from it.
Kalok, we're running out of time.
Yes, but then you keep
So let's get to
interjecting.
the point.
I'm getting to the point if you
What
allow
is
me
the
to.
point?
The point here is that the same individual who told me this, I wake up, the screens are off for 2 hours. I'm looking for the same technician. He's not here. And I'm asking him, and he's been pulled in for questioning
By who?
by the police.
On what basis?
Have you not seen what is happening? Have you not seen what the IEC
Do you think?
said?
Do you think?
Have
it's
you not
'cause
seen
do
what
you-
SEP said?
Do you think it's because he spoke to you?
I'm just saying, this is the sequence of events. The man spoke to me about what had happened at one point. I wake up in the morning, the screens are off. The same man I want to actually speak to today is not here.
But I want to hear what the man said
All of
to
a
you.
sudden.
Because in the interest of transparency, guys, because the election is a national
He
thing,
says,
right? So if it-
he says there were certain things that were done to the system in terms of numbers when it came to Gauteng. Then, in the past, when apparently at one point the screens happened.
not in this election.
Not in this election now. But now that now he told me this
What were
before.
those things? Are you ever going to tell me?
Unless you listened. I told you already, you didn't listen.
You said things were done to the screens behind the scenes. What
no,
I said, what happened?
you didn't hear me. I mentioned numbers. You just didn't hear me.
What about the numbers? They were cooked.
I said to you, they said certain things happened to the numbers. What more do you want?
What happened to the numbers?
Ask him. Maybe the police will.
But you are telling me about
But
him,
I'm
so
telling
asking
you, I'm telling you what he told me.
Kaloko, you're my source.
But I'm telling you what my source told you. Told me.
He didn't say certain things. I'm sure you went into more detail.
How? Now, are you my source now? Yes.
Good to speak to you. Someone from the MK party. Good to talk to you.
Great talking to you too.
Right, we're going to go now to Eyewitness News reporter Alpha Ramushwana, who's on the floor here at the National Results Centre, as we continue to get a sense of the feeling, the mindset among the various political parties here. Alpha, what do you have for us?
As you can see, we are on the floor at the National Results Operations Centre at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand. And you can see behind me the leaderboard. The numbers are slowly trickling in. Political parties, of course, are reflecting on how they are doing, whether or not they've met their targets. You know, we've seen earlier on the ActionSA coming out to admit that they are not actually happy with the numbers that they are seeing at the moment at the leaderboard. We've seen Mzansi Zivi saying while he's confident that he will be in parliament after the vote counting process, he's also thought he would get much bigger numbers on the national ballot. But right now we are joined by Nyaniso Cheku, spokesperson of the ATM party. Of course, we're going to be breaking down how they feel about the numbers that are reflecting on the leaderboard. My brother, thank you so much for joining us here. We see your numbers. You so far have slightly over 45,000 votes. How are you feeling?
Well, obviously one would have expected more than the 45,000 votes, with the voter turnout being as low as it is, and the complaints were received from the members of the ATM at the respective voting stations, some being turned away for lack of understanding of the Section 24A form, and some being unable to wait as long as it was required for them, because we have some waited 4 hours, 5 hours, some having to actually went back home because they just couldn't wait any longer. It was getting dark and things like that. So yes, we are at 45,000 and 75%, which translates to just under 11 million vote counted. If we are to get to 15 million because of the low voter turnout, that means there's about another 4 million votes which are still going to come, and we're hoping that there are still going to be some votes coming. As you know, the metros translate to about 55% of the national vote count, and we're left with those now.
I see you've partially put the blame on the Section 24A, that your members were not able to vote partially because of that rule. But wasn't the onus on you as the ATM to educate your members on what to do when applying for things like special vote, what to do when it comes to Section 24A?
No, definitely. We're not necessarily saying that is the reason. We're just citing that some of the concerns we received on the ground during the election day was that, yes, part of our job is to educate our members and voters when we conduct voter education, but this is not something which affects us all. Generally, the turnout on this election is low. despite the long queues you've seen, you still have a voter turnout that's low. So there's something that must be looked into in as far as conducting the elections is concerned. And we continue to appreciate those who voted for the ATM. The 45,000 is not a small chunk. So right now we've got 45,000 who believe that ATM should be part of government in this country. And obviously we've got respective numbers in different provinces, 22,000 in the Eastern Cape, 7,000 in Gauteng. So there are still those that are coming.
In 2019, you got 2 seats in the National Assembly. At the moment, with 75% of the voting districts counted, you have 45,000 votes, which translates to about 1 seat. What is your projection? Do you reckon that you will get back, your 2 seats in Parliament?
Yes, we are definitely comfortable that we will get back the 2 seats that we got in 2019. And one, the contributing factor is the low voter turnout. 2, the fact that we've got around 4 million votes that have not yet part of the votes that are declared now. So we remain hopeful, and with the information that we've been receiving from party agents, from different electoral structures that we set up in place for the ATM, so we do believe that we will indeed retain the 2 seats and will indeed get the seats in KZN and in Eastern Cape where we had seats. So we remain hopeful, even in the Free State and Mpumalanga for that matter, we remain hopeful that we do get somewhere. We'll retain the 2 seats, if not grow from the 2 seats we've got.
Let's reflect on your first term, on the ATM's first term in the National Assembly. One would say you've had a big impact, punched above your weight as a party with just 2 seats for your first term. Please reflect your first term, the ATM's first term in the National Assembly. How do you think you scored, or you did?
The purpose of the ATM in venturing into politics has always been to contribute to the betterment of people's lives in this country. And in the first term of Parliament, well, the 6th Parliament General, but our first Parliament, we made sure that we champion issues of accountability, holding both the President and the entire executive to account. We asked questions in Parliament. We proposed solutions in Parliament. We also wrote to ministers where we felt there was a need to tackle issues that affected people. The ATM is serious about changing the lives of the people, and that's what we reflected. Indeed, we were very serious, and we were actually standing for the ordinary South Africans. We are going to continue doing that given a chance, because what matters in the ATM is that people's lives must change. We are sitting at just under 12 million unemployed South Africans in this country. It cannot continue to be like that. Economy will never grow. People must work. People must own businesses. The general status of this country must improve. Education must improve and contribute to the livelihoods, or improving the livelihoods of the people. So that's what we set out to do, and we're very serious about doing it, as South Africans have seen.
Another thing that stood out in the last 5 years, actually much recently, is the ATM's fight against President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala matter. We did see you guys pioneering the whole parliamentary inquiry and vote so that the president can be impeached, although that wasn't much successful. How do you feel that you've had so much impact in just 5 years in your first term in the National Assembly?
We really feel that we remained true to what we attempted to do, what we hope to achieve. Holding President Ramaphosa to account because the Phala thing was part of the work of the ATM of accountability. And it is said that the Section 89 committee, which was led by the former Chief Justice, which recommended that the Parliament should consider further investigations, because whether or not the president could be impeached meant parliamentarians should vote and to establish a committee that would look further and deeper into the allegations of the dollars that were found in his property. But parliamentarians, majority of whom are ANC members, voted that there is no need to investigate and look into whether or not the president had some wrongs to do. It is wrong. It can't be happening. You cannot have parliamentarians defending and shielding the president from accounting. The president is in charge of a country, and the country must benefit from the president's rule. Now you have parliamentarians who said, no, that must not happen. Obviously, all what the ATM wanted to see was to remove the cloud above the president's heads and possible activities of corruption through the dollars, and that's all we wanted. We were not even saying the president is guilty. We're saying the former Chief Justice and his committee say it is possible that there may have been some wrongdoing, and because this is the president, parliamentarians should then vote into a process. By the way, the same parliamentarian voted.
I'm going to have to cut you off. We're running out of time, but I want to ask one last question. With that impact that you had in the National Assembly, with over 75% of the votes counted right now, and you having the ATM having just over 45,000 votes, does it seem to you that that impact is not translating to support? I mean, we're seeing your numbers on the screen.
Yes, it is disappointing because that's what we set out to do. But it's democracy. People voted the way they voted. They know what they want. And in the 7th Parliament, what they voted for is what they're going to get. As ATM, we cannot blame anybody. If they did not hear our message well, if they felt we should not be part of the people championing accountability and helping improve this country, well, that's democracy. Democracy means you choose who you want to see governing you, and that's what people have done.
Thank you so much. That is the spokesperson of the ATM party, effectively saying that voter turnout was a major concern for them. As we see, they are currently standing at just above 47,000 votes, and they are saying that it is disappointing that the votes are not what they expected it to be. Well, Thembekile, I'm going to bring it to you in studio now.
In fact, the National Results Operations Centre at the beginning of another long night for the various political parties and media houses, all of us here waiting to see when that final result will be in and what that ultimately will mean. The projections once more, by the way, if you've missed much of today's coverage, are that the ANC will not be able to get a 50% majority, but it's not giving up hope. Its spokesperson, Mahlengi Bengumutsiri, was saying, they're waiting still for some of the bigger voting districts to come in, and they're hoping that will move them in some way, if not to 50%, move them into, shall we say, safer ground, onto safer ground where they don't need to negotiate with certain people in order to cobble together some sort of coalition. In a moment, we'll talk about what's going to happen once all of this is done and dusted and move on to the processes in the National Assembly. We're joined by the Secretary to the National Assembly, Mr. Masibulele Xaso, in studio. We also have with us political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. And Lukhona, I want to start with you. As things stand, only 4 parties have managed to get over 1 million votes. It's the ANC, it's the DA, it's the MK, and the EFF. What does that tell us about South Africa's democracy today?
Well, it tells us that the space is actually opening up for other political players. It's probably, in actual fact, the first time that we've got a 4th party with more than 1 million votes in a long time, if ever. I mean, I don't want to give it as an authority because I'd have to look at the figures of 1999, for example, when the IFP was still relatively strong and the UDM had contested. But for a first-time party, MK is the 3rd political party since 1994 to get more than 1 million votes in its first showing. The first was the Congress of the People in 2009, 1.3 million. The EFF just over 1 million in 2014. Now 2024, MK currently sitting at 1.4 million votes and counting, to be quite frank. And
they're the biggest winners, right, in this election so far?
Well, they are the biggest winners, they are the biggest talking point, they are the biggest disruptors, and they are probably, for some people, the biggest surprise because a lot of people have actually written them off around coffee and dinner table talks. And this is partly because, and actually this is a good teaching point for a lot of South Africans, that political naivety is not a treasure. Because people used their dislike for Jacob Zuma to gauge how MK would perform.
But isn't that also another political lesson that South Africa seems to be struggling to learn, that you can never quite count Jacob Zuma out? You can't simply ever expect that he will fail outright with this sort of thing when it comes to galvanizing people behind a mission. He did it in the mid-2000s. When he was ANC president, he managed to run a tight ship during that time, and now he's formed the MK successfully.
Well, in fact, we can argue that the South African electoral landscape and many other landscapes, the jurisprudence landscape and whatever, but let's focus on the electoral landscape. The formation of COPE was a result of a protest against Jacob Zuma's leadership and the recall of former President Thabo Mbeki. And when former President Jacob Zuma, came on, and it was quite clear that some people were feeling purged, removed from their positions, they went on to form the Congress of the People in December 16, 2008, stood for elections in April, and like I said, got 1.3 million votes and 30 seats in the National Assembly itself. 2014, the EFF was a new player because parts of President Zuma's leadership then got rid of Julius Malema and Floyd Shivambu from the ANC and the ANC Youth League. And again, that impacted the electoral landscape Go to 2019, the Ramaphosa effect was a result of a response of dissatisfaction by voters to the leadership of former President Zuma. And come here now, former President Zuma, 15 years later, is still impacting the electoral landscape
So
of
for
South
good
Africa.
almost 2 decades, it's fair to say Jacob Zuma has influenced much of the ANC's fortunes in the way in which it lives and survives.
Its fortunes and currently its misfortunes. Definitely the tale of former President Jacob Zuma will be about that. The person who promised us that the ANC will rule until Jesus comes has brought Jesus back in town.
How does the ANC then move forward? I mean, from their worst electoral showing since 1994. They're trying to put on a brave face. They're hoping to form a coalition. They might be able to because mathematically it is possible. But how do they survive it? How do they survive the weight of this moment?
So the ANC has never been good at losing electoral support and then regaining it generally across all
Western
tiers,
Cape, as an
across all
example?
spheres of government. Western Cape is a good example.
City of Cape Town.
Ekurhuleni, actually, the city of Ekurhuleni is a classic recent example. They lost their majority. They went in 2016. They went into a coalition partnership with AIC, and they couldn't use that moment to then regain the support that they had lost. Instead, in 2021, the ANC even lost more support in Ekurhuleni. So this is a very important moment for the ANC because it could be the beginning of the death of the ANC as an electoral player. They need to have serious conversations and they need to give meaning to words. They can't just talk about renewal now. I kept saying in my critique of this slogan, unity and renewal, that you can't have both at the same time, because if you want unity,
renew, you have to purge also,
if you are renewing, you have to get rid of some people. You can't unite with the same people that you are saying you need to renew, because the renewal is not a concept. The renewal is about people who compromise the standing of the organization.
And then, who then should the ANC be courting for a coalition? I mean, I had a very interesting conversation with Ntlamulo Ndlela from the MK party, and he was saying, well, they don't want a coalition with a Cyril Ramaphosa-led ANC. And my point to him was, highly unlikely, I don't know if you agree, that the ANC would sack a man it elected at conference just so it can cobble together a government with a party led by its former leader who's suspended but holds membership of 2 parties.
I actually think the ANC will eventually be divided on this question. It's not going to be a natural consensus because, remember, whatever the formula becomes, your coalition partner may well influence who gets appointed into what position. So the negotiations are going to be very different. Whilst you may have an MK that says not with Ramaphosa at the helm, just like the EFF said as well, not with Ramaphosa at the helm, the DA may well say, well, in cabinet, you can't appoint so and so to a ministerial portfolio. Mm-hmm. That is still a trading issue that creates a headache. The question will be who gives a lesser headache to the ANC. From a political stability point of view, if you look at the numbers, the coalitions must really hold across the Gauteng province, KwaZulu-Natal, and nationally. There are only 2 options for the ANC because the EFF has now become an insignificant player in KwaZulu-Natal. It has become completely decimated in terms of its electoral
they're not even making 100,000
support.
at the moment.
And they were at 356,000 in the last election in KwaZulu-Natal. So the ANC really has 2 blocks of coalition possibilities. It's either it coalesces with MK or it coalesces with the DA and the IFP, because the DA and the IFP and the ANC then might, let's say...
Would that be the most stable option?
That would be the most stable option, but would that be the most politically sound option is the tough question.
Ideologically,
no,
how much does ideology, political ideology, policy position, how's all of that going to be factored in? Because if they all say the other has terrible policies, how do they come together and make it work?
So I've always sustained that South African politics are not inherently ideological. Political parties profess ideology, but South Africans themselves do not interact with politics in a way that ideologically expresses. You don't express your politics as I'm left, I'm right, I'm center-left, and so on. You look at what are the policies that are practical. So the trade-offs will probably be on what types of policies are necessary. So, for example, the DA says it would cut minimum wage, which is an act of parliament, right? And now that would mean you need to pass a repeal act, and have a bill. The ANC will hang on to the minimum wage. The IFP is an interesting political party because by nature it's a federalistic political party. Its friends in the UK is the Conservative Party, and therefore there will be a lot of fighting. In any case, Thembekile, I think The biggest fight that we are going to see going forward now, for me, is the budget, because
Everyone wants treasury.
is the budget, leave treasury. What are the priorities on the budget? What money do you apportion where? Take away money from the VIP brigades and then give it to which part? Because South Africans, because of the ANC's hegemony and its dominance, always think that the minister owns the budget. The budget is owned by Parliament. The minister simply tables the division of revenue bills,
Right.
and then the trade-offs have to happen there. For the first time, I think we will be seeing some trade-offs on budgets.
What is the likelihood that let's say the DA ANC don't find common ground? The EFF MK combination also doesn't work out with the ANC. The DA Moonshot grouping is unable to come together in a way that gets them to a coalition that can run national government. Is there a high likelihood of that, of either side, DA ANC, simply failing to produce something tangible at the end of this?
Look, I think it will depend on the seriousness of the current president to stay in power. With a result like this, I have no doubt that he's having multiple conversations with himself as to whether or not he's up to task to handle what appears. I think he'll flirt with the idea to resign. It's not inherent in his leadership to be part of chaotic arrangements.
Well, man, does he have to go talk him back from the ledge?
Chaotic arrangements are inherently, they need accountability to more than one person. I mean, he's not been able to even account to the media and account to the nation through the media. And now he would have to account to, coalition partners. He would have to be influenced by coalition partners on how to make decisions. And he's not the most quick person to take decisions. And some of his coalition partners might demand a level of urgency in decision making. So I think he's going to have a conversation with himself personally, whether he's got the stamina to hold and cobble together a coalition that he can hold together and deal with his frustration for the next 5 years. And if he's not up to task, well, of course, there may well be the other side, that some people in his political party may feel that this is the right moment to game the situation and get rid of him.
Okay, let's talk. I've kept you waiting for quite a while, sir, Mr. Masibulele, Class Secretary to the National Assembly. When all is said and done, what will the declaration, when we finally have it from the IEC, trigger from your end as the National Assembly?
All right, the elections are declared, say, on Sunday, as the IEC has said. Then we must get the list of members who are going to Parliament. It will be gazetted, the IEC had said, on the 5th of June. And then on the 6th of June, there should be an event that involves the Chief Justice, IEC, and Parliament. The IEC gives the list to the Chief Justice, then the Chief Justice to Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And once the Chief Justice sets the date, we don't have the date yet for the first sitting. All we know is that the law says within 14 days from declaration, the sitting of the NA must happen. So that will happen either before the end of 14 days or on the 14th day, we don't know. At that sitting, we then do 4 things. The swearing in of the new members, 400 members of the NA, and once they are sworn in, you then proceed to elect the speaker. One nomination, no contestation, speaker is elected on the nod. If there is contestation, then you must conduct the vote by secret ballot. If there's more than one nomination, or even it could be 2, it could be 3 nominations, then you vote by secret ballot. That session is chaired by the Chief Justice also. Speaker is elected, you then proceed to elect the Deputy Speaker. That session must be chaired by the Speaker for the Deputy Speaker. So once your House is now fully constituted, you have members, you have the Speaker, you have the Deputy Speaker, you then proceed to elect the President.
You also have a unique thing this year, don't you? With the factoring in of the fact that we had independence for the first time.
You
right?
may.
Yeah, we may.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, for people who may not have understood that aspect of how that would have had to change the way in which you think about this, because there were allocations, for example.
Yes. Look, to the extent that, of course, you would have people who are not part of parties, political parties, and independents. So it will be something new, and our rules will obviously be aligned to accommodate independents as well. So they would vote as independents, of course, or form alliances within Parliament as parties. But we don't know if we will have independence.
Doesn't look likely.
Doesn't look likely, yeah. But if there were independents, then they will be accommodated, obviously, in the processes. So
And I want to bring you, Lukona, what does it say that the independents, some would say they expected it, but the independents have not had an overwhelmingly impressive performance here.
This has been a very difficult election, I think, for everybody, not least independents, who do not have anywhere near the kind of resources that political parties have to put up and mount a fight. I mean, you look at political parties that really looked like, they are sleek, they have resources, they had billboards, they had posters, and all of these things, your BOSA, your Rise Mzansi, your ActionSA. They have not come in anywhere near the kind of votes that they said they would actually
They got about 40,000, I think, both of them.
In the 40,000s, ActionSA at about 120,000 now, finally. What it tells you is that in an election, generally in an election where there is a disruptive force, like MK, it tends to create a sound barrier for everybody else. You don't see the sound barrier during the motioning of the electioneering campaign because everybody's on TV and da da da. But on the ground, the people who are trying to convince their family members and so on, it shuts the space for anyone else if you've got such a groundswell of a disruptor. But Thembekile, it's also important that this is the first time independents are on the ballot. We saw even in terms of how the IEC presented them. I mean, I saw the ballots, for example, where in the abbreviation for the independent, it's IND, it's IND. And I thought, well, why wasn't the independent allowed to choose an abbreviation for themselves, which might be a nickname that they are popularly known about, or a name
Something more identifiable.
Something that's more, because IND is not an identifier for the independent candidate, which was why Annelemta,
very generic,
which
right?
was why Annelemta at the launch of at the signing of the code of conduct said, "Where's my photo that I submitted?" And subsequently, the IEC actually realized that actually a photo is part of the identifiers equivalent to a logo for a political party. So with time, things will change. I mean, even established democracies like Australia, it's only like in the last 3 or 4 years that Australia actually had an independent candidate emerge to Senate after decades of independence being able to run for Senate.
It's a slow march sort of to the finish. Mr. Klaus, I want to come back to you. Look on, I use an interesting word, disruptors. We've come to associate the National Assembly with a lot of noise, a lot of disruption. Is there anything in the process that could disrupt, stall, pause the process over the next 14 days and what you then have to do in your part in the democratic journey?
Look, I mean, the only thing I can think of is at the first sitting itself. For whatever reason, members refuse to participate in the voting process. And the law says you must do those elections at that first sitting. Yeah? So that is one way or one scenario that you could have that could amount to a disruption. Of course, the law says the Chief Justice is in charge of that sitting. So in that sitting, our rules do not apply. The rules of the Chief Justice will apply. So he will make whatever rulings he needs to make. The closest that we have had before, it's certain members who said, no, we won't participate in the election of the president. And the question was whether Chief Justice would allow them or not allow them. And Chief Justice said, no, okay, if you don't want to participate, you don't have to participate. So it's difficult to tell what could arise in that sitting in terms of disruptions, but anything is possible.
Well, for your sake, we hope for the best. Mr. Masibulele Klaus, Secretary to the National Assembly, Luka Namguni, one of our analysts here with Eyewitness News for the course of this election. Thank you so much to you both, gentlemen. That'll do it for this special broadcast from the National Results Operations Centre of the IEC. Eyewitness News back again with you tomorrow. You can also catch much more of our content on the EWN app as well as Prime Media Plus. We also have radio bulletins on 702 947 Cape Talk and KFM, up-to-the-minute reporting as well on our website, where you can see what exactly is going on as we continue to watch those results on the board here at the Results Centre. In fact, before we go, let's see if we can get a closer look at what exactly is going on with that board. There's not been a drastic change at the moment. The bell has just gone off, but I'll tell you, I hear cheers. There's a bit of celebrating. You might not be able to hear it. The ANC has hit 5 million votes. So breaking news as we prepare to come off air, the ANC has now reached 5 million votes. Still not enough to get them an outright majority to be able to form a government nationally on their own. But the breaking news tonight is that the African National Congress, which has a lot to chew on this weekend, has now reached the 5 million mark, and we will continue to bring you those results throughout the evening via those platforms that I told you about, Prime Media Plus app, the EWN app, and of course our radio stations, 567, that's Cape Talk, as well as 702 KFM and 947. Until next time, take care, good night, and thank you for watching.